Hey, ¿qué pasa, Calexico? Welcome back to the podcast. Before we begin, a couple people to thank, my anchor sponsors, Jonathan, Sergio, and Jake. Thank you guys for sponsoring the podcast. Also, David Castellum, if you're thinking of buying or selling a home, thinking of buying an investment property in Imperial or San Diego counties, then you must call David Castellum at 760-235-9576. He's not only a realtor, but also an investor with over 20 years of experience. He will not only sell you a property, but teach you along the way in one of the most important investments that you will make in your life. If you can also find David on Facebook or just give him a call, 760-235-9576. And he actually got my sister-in-law house yesterday, so that's pretty cool. Also want to thank the Rebollar family for letting me use Brownie's Diner today and record. And shout out to Gil because he suggested today's guest. Today's guest is Michael
Domenzian.
Yeah, I was like, how do you pronounce his last name? And I was asking you, where does your last name come from? I've never heard of.
Yeah, it's not the typical Hispanic name. I am Hispanic. My grandparents were from Guadalajara in Guanajuato. The name actually comes from Spain. My great grandfather moved from Spain when he was, I believe, in his 30s to Guanajuato, and started his family there. And obviously, we kind of trickled down through there, but it is Hispanic. It's an uncommon name. I believe it's from the Basque region, so it's sort of the northern portion of Spain, southern tip of France. And I haven't met anyone else in the valley with that last name who is not related to me. So if there is a Domenzian that you have met, they're related to me somehow here.
Okay. My last name is not common either. It's Alejos.
Alejos. Yeah, I haven't heard that last name too much either growing up in the valley. So in good company.
Yeah. There's Alejos in Mexicali, but here in the valley there's only us. Yeah. So like the same. If you know somebody that's an Alejos, it's probably related to me. So usually I have my guests, tell us a little bit about themselves. Like you said, you're a valley boy. You're from the valley. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Growing up. Think you grew up in El Centro?
Yeah. So I grew up in El Centro. Pretty much moved around a lot. I didn't come from a very privileged background, but we lived over on Orange and El Centro, on Olive, the east side, west side. My grandparents, when they moved here back in the 40s, they bought a house over on Woodward and 10th. And the house is still there. They lived there pretty much until they passed away a few years back. But I lived all over El Centro. Went to Central Union High School, graduated in 2000.
From 2000?
Yeah, 2000.
I'm class of 2000 as well.
2000, that's the best class. The last of a millennium. And from there, I went to IVC, and from IVC, I transferred out, went to San Diego State here locally, did my undergraduate degree in criminal justice administration, worked a lot of odd jobs here and there while I was going to school. So, kind of worked my way through college. After I got my bachelor's degree, I was sort of in this position where I was debating whether I wanted to get a master's degree or go to law school. And it was kind of interesting the way that happened for me. I actually had, as a professor, a retired judge now, Raymond Cota, who's Valley native as well. He grew up in Calexico. And, Judge Cota was actually one of the people who I was able to do a externship with. So I worked with him doing that actually I should say internship for my undergraduate degree, and I got to watch court proceedings. I got to visit the clerk's office and read motions and things that were being filed, see attorneys arguing cases. And one of the cases that was actually being argued at the time when I was doing that was a murder case. The victim in that case was actually the older brother of a girl who I grew up next to in El Centro back when I was living at some apartments over on the south side of El Centro, kind of where the old El Sol market used to be. So, when I saw that and I kind of had a chance to look at the way evidence was presented, see the attorneys arguing, kind of swayed me. From there, I took the LSATs. I, passed. No, you don't really pass those. You just get a score. I got accepted to some law schools and ended up going to law school in San Diego. Once I finished up there, took the bar. I passed the bar on my first try, luckily for me. Oh, wow. And then I came back to the Valley and started here.
So you were first doing administration of justice, and that was just something that
Yeah, when I first started off, I wanted to go into law enforcement. I wasn't quite sure where. I was thinking some federal agency, perhaps Customs, Border Patrol. Growing up in the Valley, a lot of people look at that and they say, "Hey, it's a good career. It provides excellent benefits, good salary, and it's a good job."
Yeah.
So
because when I graduated, I went to first I wanted to be a teacher, but then working at a school for a long time. I still work at a school, but working at a school and looking all these credentials that they even after you get your BA, you have to do all these credentials and stuff. It's like, man, it's like you go to school and then you have to do all these. I'd rather be like a doctor or something, because you're investing the same amount of time. It's like a lot of time invested into it. So I went into administration of justice thinking, I'm going to go into law enforcement, but I ended up, just staying where I'm at. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a lot of people go into the administration of justice field here in the Valley. So
we're very. I mean, there was a study that was done some years ago, and I mean, if you're not in farming here, you're probably in law enforcement, and it's kind of unique here because we really do have a lot of law enforcement agencies working together on various task forces, and just about every agency you can think of. They're here. Even FBI and things like that. They have an office down here, a small field office, satellite office from their San Diego division. So yeah, you can get into law enforcement. It was what I was looking to do, and once I started getting closer to completing my bachelor's, I decided I wanted to attempt the graduate study. So that's how I found myself in law, and it's been a good career so far.
So when you came back, where did you start?
So when I came back, the thing about the California bar is, actually any bar, is until you get your bar results and you're actually sworn in as an attorney, you can't actually work as an attorney. So I was fortunate enough, I actually graduated from law school. It took me 2.5 years. Typically it's 3 years if you're going full-time, 4 years if you're going part-time. My first year in law school, I took a legal writing course during the summer. I was able to gain some units from that. And then the next summer, I actually worked in a clinic where you went out with a licensed attorney who was a professor at the law school I went to. And you essentially get to work on cases in court, just as a real attorney, while the attorney sits back and basically provides you some guidance. And that was with the Veterans Legal Assistance Clinic in San Diego. It's VLAC. The individuals that you help there are people who are veterans of the armed services and who have, fallen on hard times or have issues that they need to resolve, legal issues. A lot of it was easy stuff, helping them finalize divorces, getting fines and old things like that taken off. But it was a good experience for me, and I was also able to gain credits from that as well during my second year in summer. So with all those extra credits, I was able to finish up in 2.5 years, and I took the bar in February as my first time, whereas most people will take it in the summer. And I was able to pass that, but you don't get your results until a couple of months later. So right before I actually walked for graduation with my class that I entered in with, I had gotten my results, knew I had passed, and had gotten sworn in. But in between that time, it's interesting that you mentioned education, because I was actually substitute teaching.
Oh, really?
Yes, I was.
I was going to ask you, how are you?
I was substitute teaching during that time. That's how I was supporting myself. And it was interesting going back and subbing at some of the schools here locally.
You were subbing here in the Valley?
Yeah, here in the Valley. I had moved back to the Valley, and I was substituting here locally. Once I got my bar results, of course, I stopped doing that, and I worked a couple of cases on my own. I had clients coming in, and I worked with some local attorneys on a contract basis. And then come about December of that year, is about 6 months in, a spot opened up at the district attorney's office. I applied for it and interviewed, and I got hired, and spent most of the rest of my career there until I got appointed last year to the bench.
When you got appointed, how old were you?
I was 36.
But when you got your job as a DA.
Oh, I'm sorry. As a DA, I was 26, I believe. 26.
So is that young, like relatively?
It's relatively young. There's certainly people who have gotten in younger than I had, but for the most part, you see people coming in usually in their late 20s, sometimes early 30s. So I did start young, and I get that a lot. People are like, "You're kind of young to be on the bench, don't you think?" Well, I'm young, but I have the experience as well. Mm-hmm. And it was wonderful working at the office, the district attorney's office. I got a lot of experience there that otherwise, I would not have had, and I think it certainly helped me so far in, my new position now.
Was some other interesting stuff that you did in the DA?
So, when I started off there, I started off like any other attorney does. They're typically, you start off in misdemeanors. So I did misdemeanors for about a year and a half, misdemeanor crimes, petty theft and DUIs, simple battery cases mostly. From there, I went to general felonies for a year. And the way the office here works is when you're in general felonies, it can be everything from, what are termed as wobblers. A wobbler is something that can be charged as either a felony or a misdemeanor. So sometimes you could think of them as a lower end felony crime, such as when somebody has their fourth GUI, but for the fact that they've had these other priors, it would have been a misdemeanor, all the way up to, murder. That's the way the general felonies work. So I did some cases there. I did everything all the way up to attempted murder. And then from there, I actually went to the Special Prosecutions Unit, which here in the Valley at this district attorney's office, that is their Major Narcotics Division. So I worked there for about 4 years in the Major Narcotics Division, mostly handling the wiretaps. So, you see on television when the cops are listening in on somebody's phone calls. It's a real thing. It's a lot more complex than it's led on to be on television. But, I did that for a while. We did a number of cases. Some of them were fairly interesting. One that comes to mind is, we prosecuted an individual who was a former sheriff deputy along with some co-conspirators for a conspiracy to kidnap for ransom. They were actually going to go up and basically hold somebody until he paid for a load that he had lost of narcotics. And, the task force, which consisted of DEA and the Imperial County Narcotics Task Force, did a really, really fantastic job on that. And we were able to get a prosecution, and that's actually something that he's serving life right now. It's an indeterminate life sentence because of the aggravating circumstance of the ransom issue. So I did a number of cases there that.
From the Valley, were there any people that you were like, I remember growing up with you, or? Yes,
that's probably one of the weirder things that happens to you, especially someone like myself. I didn't grow up again in the nicer parts of the Valley. I don't come from money at all. My parents divorced when I was really young, and I don't really have a relationship with my father. I never, I met him a couple times growing up, and I can count the times on my, on one hand. So I spent most of the time with my mother, and as a result of that, you tend to grow up in some of the poorer areas of the Valley. And I can tell you, my first year in, there was an individual who was being prosecuted for a simple drug crime. I was doing misdemeanors back then. And it was somebody who I knew for a good 8 years. He had spent the night at my house, I think, on occasion. And he came up for a prosecution, and I seen him, and I was like, wow, it's a position that, who knows, maybe in other circumstances I could have found myself in. Obviously, I couldn't go through with that prosecution. I had to recuse myself because of the, relationship, or even though it's a prior relationship, I hadn't seen him in probably 10 years at that point, it's, still something that you don't want to make the appearance of impropriety. So I didn't proceed with that prosecution. I handed it off to someone else who took care of it. But it's weird. It's the only way you can explain it. It's weird when you see somebody who you grew up next to being prosecuted. I actually prosecuted a teacher too.
Oh, wow.
He was one of my teachers in Central High School it was a drug crime, and it was awkward to do that as well. But it's something that unfortunately happens when you're from a small community like this, and if you come back and you're in that type of profession, it's going to happen. I'm sure police officers have to deal with it all the time, the ones who are from here.
Yeah. Do you think that living in a single parent household kind of like motivated you to get out of the valley, or not get out of the valley, but be something bigger,
I think so. And it's something that, oftentimes when I tell people, my background, how I grew up, my mom was on welfare. I grew up, I remember using food stamps at the store. I know a lot of people who grew up around me who grew up in that same type of situation, and they're still in that type of situation. Case in point, the individual I was telling you about earlier with the drug crime. For me, and it was just something that even growing up as a child, I knew that's not what I wanted. And fortunately enough for me, my grandparents, even though I didn't have my father in my life, my grandparents were your traditional Hispanic, hardworking family. My grandpa owned a gas station over in Imperial and Barione. It used to be the Exxon station that was across the street from the Circle K there. He had a shop, and he worked there 6 days a week. I remember going with him on Saturdays, and that certainly instilled some work ethic in me.
Yeah.
Seeing how hard he worked, but it's something I knew I didn't want to do. I didn't want to get caught in that cycle, so
yeah, and
it certainly pushed me.
It's not. I mean, we never know when we're gonna need help, and maybe that could be even a motivation, to be this is not what I want to be, but want to be bigger than that. Because a lot of people, even now in the political environment that we are now, people think oh, you're in welfare,
yeah. And a good example of that is, we just went through the government shutdown, and, there were federal agents. I know, because I have a lot of friends who work for federal agencies, not just from working with them as a DA. These are people I grew up with. One of my best friends he works for Customs, and, you had people from Customs and Border Patrol applying for welfare, because, they weren't getting paid. And, that the majority of people, I think that is, where it's coming from. There are people who really do need the help because they've fallen on hard times. There are people who aren't collecting benefits because they don't want to work. It's because something has happened in their life that they can't. Now, not to say that it doesn't happen. There's certainly a lot of people who take advantage of it, and who are cheating or gaming the system. But you think you have to look at the realities of it. It's certainly necessary, and I'm thankful because had that not been provided to my mom while I was growing up, maybe I wouldn't be able to be in this position that I am now.
Yeah.
But
yeah, you probably would have had to hustle and do something else that
Right, and that those were certainly things that were around as well. Growing up in the parts of the valley that I grew up in, that was all around. So I'm thankful that I was again able to I went to school, and I've been working since about as early as you can work. I tell people I've been working since 13 if you count a paper route, back when that was a thing. I remember having a paper route, but from the time I hit 16, I had a job, and I've been working ever since. And that's just the way I am. But I like to do a lot of things with kids too, and go around and talk to schools. Right now I'm working a mentorship with some students at IVC. It's called the Puente membership, and when I was at the DA's office, I did a lot of work with the schools. That office is very good about getting out to the schools. They have a specific program called LEAD, where they go out and they talk to different schools and fifth grade students about the legal system. But, for someone like myself, I think it's important to get out there and show people, especially kids who might not be coming from, I don't want to say a privileged background, but kids who are coming from money, so to speak. It's sort of hard to word it.
Yeah,
but, kids who are underserved, they're underprivileged. They're single parent households. They have parents who, may be incarcerated, that kind of thing. To show them, listen, just because you're in this spot now doesn't mean that you can't work your way out of it. Yeah, everyone can work their way out of it. If I was able to work my way out of it, you can do it too. I'm not special in that regards.
Yeah.
You take advantage of everything that's been given to you or things that can be given to you, and you can certainly pull yourself out of that situation. You don't have to be stuck there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's important that we, because if you look at our, especially, I know Calexico, right? So, if you look at our population, we have a lot of, low income housing, where a lot of the people, growing up in low income, a lot of the kids are single parent or they're being raised by their grandparents, or the situations where they're not really. Even as a Hispanic Mexican, your parents are never really like on top of you. They're like either busy working or doing something else, but they're not really like looking out for you. Like, hey, did you do your homework? Have you applied for this college, or all these things that people who are well informed, who are like you were saying, like with money, like they're looking out for you, like because they want a better future for you.
Right.
It's important that people that have kind of lived through that, kind of like talk to them, make them really see and believe that they could become.
Yeah, kids need to be motivated. They do. There are people in every aspect who are going to motivate themselves, but like I was saying earlier, my grandparents are a big part of that for me. I can remember even as a child, 6 years old, and I was one of those people you say, kind of raised by your grandparents as well. I live with my mom, but every weekend I was with my grandparents, Friday through Sunday. My grandparents were picking me up from school and taking me home, that kind of thing. But I remember them pushing on me, you're going to go to college, you're going to go to college, you're going to go to college, you're going to do this. When you have that constant push, it certainly makes it easier. It'd be wonderful for me to say, well, I'm completely self-made and I came up with it. I'm not. No one really is. People say they are, but it's not true. Everyone has some help somewhere along the way, whether that be, financial help or not. It could also be a mentor. It could be somebody who's pushing you to do something. With that little push from somebody, even if it's just words of encouragement, like you said, telling people, hey, these are your options. Make sure you're doing this. Make sure you're applying for college. Make sure you're setting yourself up to take an SAT. Make sure you're applying for scholarships. That's very important for kids in that kind of situation, because you get them to a certain point and it's kind of like kind of like a bird. You get them up high enough and you let them go, and they're kind of able to do it on their own.
Yeah.
And I think that's certainly what happened with me. I got pushed enough, and once I got out of high school and hit IVC and started doing my own thing in college and San Diego State, it just took over. I didn't need somebody to push me anymore. It turned into me pushing myself. Like, no, I want to get my bachelor's. No, I want to get a graduate degree. No, I want to go to law school. I want to do this. I want to do that. Setting goals for yourself once you've been kind of molded from a youth to do that. So,
yeah, you didn't feel like this is good. This is good enough. My BA is like
right.
I'm good here. Like right. you wanted.
And that's not to say that people with just the bachelor's degree aren't.
Yeah.
Certainly it's good to get any sort of higher education, and there are plenty of people doing extremely well with no college degree.
Yeah.
But again, it's really more about just setting the goals and having something for yourself once you get to that certain point. But again, people don't necessarily get there on their own. You need to take them from a young age, and you need to instill that in them. And I think to a large extent, that's the issue with kids, like you were saying, who grow up in that situation or situations like I grew up in, is that they don't have those people there. Because like you said, even if it's not necessarily, okay, well, they're a single parent household, maybe both their parents are working and the parents just don't have time to do it. And the grandparents, especially here in our community, a lot of grandparents are still coming from, Mexico, and things are different there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're old school. Exactly. The culture is different. And you see that not just the way that people are raised, but you see it. I see it in court too. People come in and they don't quite understand the system that we're in, and you do your best to certainly explain it to them so that they have an understanding of that.
Yeah. So now you're a judge, or
so my official title is I'm a referee. Most people are like, referee.
Yeah.
You tell me football. Like it's so referee, like a commissioner or anything else. You're a judicial officer. The state considers me a judicial officer. It's a subordinate judicial officer. So basically, I handle the things that the judges would be overwhelmed with if they had to take care of that on top of the calendars that they already have to cover. So right now, my assignment is basically limited jurisdiction civil cases, which means small claims. Basically, anytime somebody is suing each other and it's $10,000 and under, I'll be the judge who's presiding over that to listen to the evidence and make a decision, do the legal research if it needs to be done. And then I also handle infractions, arraignments, as well as the court proceedings when there's actual trials on those things. And I was appointed to that last July. So that's certainly an interesting career change for me, coming from a DA to this now. Typically, you're not dealing with people who are represented. As a matter of fact, there are specific rules about limited claims jurisdictions and when attorneys can and cannot. Most of the times, an attorney cannot make an appearance for somebody in a civil case unless there's very limited circumstances. But you're dealing with pro pers. These are people who don't know anything about the law, so you have to sort of change your approach to it and how you deal with them, because you want them to certainly feel like they're having an opportunity to tell their side of their case and feel that the system is working for them. But because they don't know how the system works, you also have to be sort of a teacher to them and explain things a lot more than you would when you're dealing with an attorney, of course.
Yeah.
But I love it so far. It's been wonderful. I've gained a lot of knowledge. The training that you get as a judicial officer, you get the same trainings as the judges. It's second to none. And just dealing with the people. People have been surprisingly good. I was a little concerned because people told me, you're going to be dealing with some upset people. They're perhaps more upset than people you dealt with, as criminal defendants. And it always kind of struck me like, why? Because you think about it, especially with, take for instance a traffic ticket. Most people who you're dealing with when you're doing felonies, and I'm not saying all of them, but a lot of them, they've had priors.
Yeah.
So, to them, I'm not saying that it's not a big deal. Of course it is. It's a criminal case against them. Their freedom is at risk. But, they don't go into it with the same sense of, it's a court case. They don't have the same, attitude towards it as a person who has never been in trouble with the law whatsoever. Now they have this ticket, and they see it as this huge blemish on an otherwise perfect record. And in the end, it's a traffic ticket. It's an infraction. It's they're not going to jail for it. They can't. It's not that serious of an issue, but for them it is.
Yeah.
And so I was told you may deal with people who are going to be extremely upset because they look at it as a blemish on an otherwise perfect record. They look at it as a criminal charge, and you explain to them what it is when they make their first court appearance. And surprisingly, I haven't dealt with anyone who's really been rude or has been over the top. There's been a couple of situations where that's taken place, but it's an anomaly. It doesn't happen often. Most people are very respectful, and I try to be very respectful of people too in court. I think the biggest thing is making sure that people, again, feel that it's fair and that they can actually say their piece.
Yeah.
I think it's the biggest thing for people. They want to be able to tell their side of the story.
Which do you think is which do you enjoy more, the traffic cases or like the small claims?
I got to say the small claims probably. Traffic sort of
That's kind of straight to the...
Yeah, I mean, you're typically looking at speeding charges, and a speeding charge is a speeding charge. They have the same elements. The civil cases, because I didn't have a large civil background coming in, were and are a little more interesting to me, just because I feel that it's something that I'm learning new things. So, I have to do legal research before a case is called to look at, what it is that they're claiming. And sometimes that's a little difficult because, again, you're dealing with people who don't have a legal background. So,
and they're representing themselves, right?
Yeah. And so their complaint might say, well, I loaned this person money and he was supposed to pay me back. So you're looking at a breach of contract. They gave him a loan. These were the terms of the loan, but they don't word it like that. So you're doing a little bit more research and looking into it to see, what the elements of each, the cause of action are, that sort of thing. And that's interesting to me. I'm a person who likes to think that or at least know that I'm learning something new. And because I didn't have too much civil background, I feel like that. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, we're good. No, we're good. Yeah. I was in a small claims actually one time. I loaned this girl some money because her mom had she went on a trip, and while she was changing planes in Dallas, I think she got really sick, and they found her in the restroom, and they took her to the hospital, and she was like in a coma. She needed money to go see her. So I loaned her the money for plane tickets for her and her aunt. And she just, after she came back, like time passed and like she wouldn't pay me. So like I took her to small claims, and then she's like we got there, and she's like, yeah, I owe him money. I just needed him to bring me here so that I could, make myself pay him. I'm like, really? Like you made me go through that crap?
And that happens too. We often get people, on the day of the trial, that the trial is set, they'll get in there and, sometimes you can kind of tell because you see them talking in the background, and, I'll ask the parties, listen, I noticed that you had a conversation, before we start testimony in the case, let me ask you, is there a dispute about the amount owed? And a lot of times people, defendant raise their hand, no, I agree, I owe them this money. For me, it's just an issue of payments, and the court can do that. We often will set conditional judgments. That means that a party will be ordered to essentially keep a payment plan, and if they don't follow that, then the plaintiff would get a judgment just as they would as if we had actually gone through a full court trial. And then, of course, it's up to them as to how they're going to collect that judgment, which oftentimes is actually the bigger problem for people because I think a lot of people don't come into the system understanding that, and that's something I like to let them know as well when they're there, is that your initial court trial is just for the court to determine whether or not you were legally wronged and how much the damages for that legal wrong are. That doesn't mean that because you have this judgment, suddenly when you get that in the mail, there's going to be a check with it. You're still responsible for trying to collect that judgment. And there's certainly things that people can do in order to do that. And we have an advisor that works at the court that kind of walks people through those types of things.
Like to me, we ended up deciding to work it out on our own. Mm-hmm. And she ended up not paying me $200 or something. Cause I think I loaned her $1,000.
Yeah.
So she ended up not paying me $200. But I was like, you know what? I'll
cut the losses at some point.
Yeah. So I was like,
no, it's interesting. I like it. I love it. It's been good so far.
So are there any new laws that, have been placed in effect recently that, you think the people should kind of
every year, typically in January, of course, there's a number of new laws that fall into place. One of the big things is, with fines for traffic fees. A lot of people come into court, and I give this whole explanation at people's initial court appearance. I think they look at, me or any other judicial officer or judge who's sitting there, and they say, well, he can do whatever he wants. He's the judge. That's not true. We, like everyone else, we have laws, and your job as a judge is to follow the law. I don't make up the laws as I see fit. I follow what the law says I need to do.
Or the amount of the fine.
And the fine. And what I tell people is, listen, I do want to let everyone know, I don't set the fines and fees. Neither does anybody in this courthouse. No judge in this courthouse or even this county is the one who sets these fees and fines. These fees and fines are set by what's called a bail schedule. That bail schedule is made up by people way up north, and everyone has to follow that schedule unless I have a legally valid reason as to why I need to reduce that. And basically the law says that there has to be an extreme financial hardship or a financial hardship. Unless they're telling me it's a financial hardship for them, and then they have to fill out forms, and there actually has to be a financial hardship, not just an inconvenience, like you can't go to Starbucks this month, or you can't, spend money in Mexicali at the bars. That's not a financial hardship. You make enough money to pay it. It's inconvenient to pay it. I know I've had traffic tickets.
Yeah.
So I know it's certainly not something you want to spend your money on, but unless it's an actual financial hardship and per the guidelines, I can't reduce it. I don't have the legal authority to do that just because I want to, or because I'm like, oh yeah, I feel bad for somebody. Oftentimes that's the biggest thing. People will come in and they'll say, hey, it's my first ticket. Can I get a discount? And I try to explain to them, listen, if it is your first offense, most likely the discount, it's built into the schedule, because if it really is a first offense, your fine's going to be set at the base minimum. And
so there's say it's a speeding ticket. There's a range where
a range. Usually the base minimum is going to be 225. That's set per the schedule, and then it goes up from there depending on priors, depending on if you're over a certain speed. Anything, if you're over 15 miles above the speed limit, then it goes up a little, and then more and more by then, every 5 mile increments. But one of the laws, and I kind of digressed there for a while, but one of the laws that changed was, so now, we can give somebody community service if they are having an extreme financial hardship, but the way that's calculated is different. So as before, a judge had the discretion to pretty much set it wherever they wanted in terms of how much are they going to be paying towards this fine for each hour of community service. There's now a formula that requires that the minimum is $22, which is double the minimum wage. So if somebody does satisfy that requirement, that they have an extreme financial hardship and they get community service in lieu of a fine, then for every hour of community work service that they do, it's $22 off that fine until it's paid in full through their service hours.
But it's only for the people that
can actually demonstrate a financial hardship like that. And, again, not everyone can. Sometimes, you have people, they say, well, I'm experiencing a hardship. And then when you take a look at everything, they're working full time, and, they're just like a lot of other people that, rent's tough, and, clothing and you have bills, but, that's not a financial hardship if you're not, struggling, so to speak. If you have an entertainment budget, it's got to come out of there.
And is there, can anybody qualify for a payment plan, or?
Yeah, so typically we offer payment plans, and that's another thing, I definitely steer people towards when they haven't established a financial hardship. We give them payment plans all the time, and that the court does have discretion to set what the payments are. And I've set payments sometimes as low as $5 a month when it's somebody who really, I see that they don't have the financial hardship, but, I know they probably won't be able to make a $25, $30, $40, $50 payment. So we can set that up. There is a fee that's set by the state. Again, it's $30. And basically, anytime we give somebody a payment plan, we have to add that on. But it's just a one-time fee. But we give them payment plans, and then I basically use the total amount. I like for people to have it paid off in less than 2 years, so that way they're not continually paying on this thing that's 5 years old. So I've set payments between $5 and maybe $75, depending on how high the fees and fines are. Trying to think of some of the other laws that probably affect people, traffic laws especially. There's new helmet laws for people who are 18 and older in terms of bicycles and when they do and don't have to. There's changes to the licensing process. People who identify as transgender or people who don't identify as male or female, I think they call it binary, they can actually mark that as a gender on their license now per the vehicle code. So if they choose other, it says X now, so there's no male, female. Exhaust noise, it's no longer a fixable violation. So for people who are really into cars, that's something that they're probably interested in. Before, if you got a ticket because your exhaust was too loud, it was something that you could correct. So you basically take it, you get the issue resolved, you bring it in, and the fine was lowered to a fix-it ticket, which is a fee that's set by the state. It's a $25 administrative fee. The law changed, so now it's no longer a fixable offense. So even if you get it fixed, you still have to pay that full fine per the law. So there's that one. And there's just a couple of other ones that have come into play regarding, vehicle sales and things like that. But for the most part, that's stuff that your dealership's gonna handle for you. I'm sure if you've seen somebody driving around a new car, you notice that they have these paper plates now. That's as a result of a law change. So
yeah, I saw that yesterday. I was like, that was kind of weird. Like,
yeah, you're required to have a plate on the car, even at the point of sale, for a new vehicle. So they drive off the lot, it has to have some temporary plates on it. No longer have that little sticker that counts. You got to have plates on it, which is for identification purposes. Of course, you don't want somebody committing a crime and then across. So yeah, those are probably the ones that are going to affect people the most. But there's a website, and you can actually go, and usually the Sacramento Bee, they'll have every January a list of all the new traffic laws that people can go through and look at. So, and it's certainly good for people to know these kinds of things because, for the most part, again, people aren't criminals. If they have a run-in with the law, it's going to be something like that, a traffic ticket. That's all I can think of.
So, I know you're kind of running low on time. You need to go, but before we go, I want to ask you something. And you don't have to answer it, but do you think that the judge on the Manafort case was a little bit like
Paul Manafort, a little biased, a little unbiased?
Yeah, like 4 years for.
I don't know because I don't know much of the facts about that case, obviously, and that's a big thing that people often don't understand. You get cases that come out in the paper and say, why is this person getting probation? Why is this person getting, so many years when this person didn't get this many years? And, all I can say is that, the judge hopefully has all of the facts and will make that determination. And if, he saw it fit to give him that much time, I would presume that he has a reason to do that. Some pretty serious crimes he was convicted of, certainly, but ultimately that's a judge's call. Sentencing is a judge's call, and I would think that he would make the right decision, at least in his own mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's because I'm a big fan of this whole situation with our
current political climate.
Yeah. To me, like, my wife's like, why are you so into this? Like, this is like my favorite reality show right now. Like,
yeah, it certainly feels like that sometimes. As a judicial officer, you're always mindful of what you say, because there are rules that apply to us at all times of the day. We really don't make political statements about parties and things like that. What I can say about our current political climate right now without, I think giving up, or picking a side, so to speak, is that there's a lot of hyper partisanship on both sides.
Yeah.
On all sides, actually, for whatever it is that you claim yourself to be, Democrat, Republican, independent, liberal, conservative. It seems like there's no more dialogue. You're either on one side or you're on the other side. And, if somebody doesn't agree with you, well, they're absolutely wrong. And I think that you need to have a conversation with people, much like you would, in a courtroom setting where you're listening to all sides. You have to understand where other people are coming from, and if you lose that, it's a very dangerous place to be in for, I think, society in general. You have to be open to having a conversation with people.
Yeah, and it's just that, being able to talk about, the situation and not be so like aggressive to your opinion.
Yeah.
Just listen, and if you agree, it's fine, and if you don't,
Yeah, let's agree to disagree on certain aspects. Certainly. There are some things, it's like, some things aren't really disagreeable. Sometimes facts are facts, and, if something's very solid in terms of evidence, you can't really disagree with that. And if you do, maybe you're being unreasonable. But yeah, for the most part, I think that everybody can certainly come together a little bit more than they have and talk about, their differences. It certainly would be helpful in a lot of situations nowadays.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, we're going to end today's episode. Michael, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Maybe we'll come back someday and continue talking of new laws, or if you go up, because I don't know. One of the questions was, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Do you see like?
I certainly, it's no secret. I'm fairly young for being on the bench, especially even if it's a subordinate judicial officer. I'm 36 years old, and I was 35 when I was appointed. So certainly a lot of room for me to grow. Right now, I'm just learning the job still, and taking in all the information that I'm given and going to the trainings, and certainly trying my best to be the best judicial officer at what I'm doing right now. But certainly, in the future, if there's retirements on the bench from, some of these judges, it may be something where I'll try to go to a full judgeship and try to get in there. I really do enjoy public service, working in the public sector. I worked, again, since I was, 16, and I worked in a lot of private industry too. From about 19 to 26, I worked in banking. So, I worked retail too, obviously, when I was going to school, but, my first professional experience wasn't in law or anything else. It was in banking. So, I worked for one of the local credit unions. I worked for one of the local banks. I worked in compliance for that bank. So making sure that the laws that are required to be followed for certain types of transactions or to fraud prevention, that kind of thing, money laundering prevention, were adhered to. So I worked basically in what would be the legal department for the bank. When I went to law school, I worked for a private lease negotiation firm that essentially did renegotiations for land lease contracts for the big telecom agencies, so AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. And I did that, and private industry is certainly great. I loved it, and it allowed me to, work my way through school and law school, and help me pay my bills, of course. And it was a wonderful experience, and I gained a lot of friendships from people who I work with and experience. But there's nothing like the public sector. I appreciate the fact that hopefully I'm able to give back to the community that's given me so much. Because I don't know if I was in my same situation growing up in another community, I don't know if I'd be able to be in the position I am. Yeah. I honestly don't. If I was in a big city like LA or New York and I came from this, would I be able to be here where I'm at now? Probably not. So I appreciate working for this community, and I think that in 10 years, if I was able to be a full-time judge, I think that's just sort of the next steps and next progression. But we'll see. Plenty of time. Still a young man.
Yeah, we're still young.
I'm
36 too.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so you know exactly what I'm talking
Actually,
about.
I'll be 37 on Tuesday. So.
Oh, well, happy early birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, thank you for being here, and hopefully, like I said, maybe in the future we'll sit down and continue our chat. Maybe you'll be a judge by then, or or having a new project.
I appreciate it greatly, and you keep doing what you're doing. Like I was saying before we started the recording, I think what you do is excellent work for the community as well. You provide them something with that's showing them something that they otherwise I don't think would have. So,
thank you. All right. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.